All right, thank you for joining the Capital Region chapter of the Public Relations Society of America for our 4th annual Women in Public Relations panel discussion. I'm Heather Schechter, a board member and a past president, and I've been honored to moderate the panel. If you're interested in learning more about our chapter, you can connect with a board member or visit our website at prsacapitalregion.org. I'm also the Chief Strategy Officer for Sunrise Management and Consulting. We manage apartment communities and Sunrise Solar's co-working in the Capital Region and have a passion for building great communities. Thank you to Sunrise for the use of this Zoom account for today's webinar. I wanted to start with a look back at the impressive panelists who have participated over the years. PR professionals are often behind the scenes, writing quotes and writing speeches that are attributed to others. One of the goals of this discussion is to showcase some of the women behind the press releases and behind the strategic relationship building. Here are our panelists from 2018 and from 2019. Both the 2018 and 19 panels were held in person at Urban Coworks in Schenectady. I want to point out Michelle Olson, who is to the right of me in this picture, and currently the board president for PRSA National. Next to her is Rosalind Whitaker Heck of Champlain College, who many of you saw last week if you participated in the PRSA Northeast Regional Conference, and who I believe is joining us here today on Zoom. After this event, I will have had the honor of featuring 15 amazing women who work in public relations. These were our 2020 panelists. Unfortunately, the pandemic forced our panel into a Zoom webinar format. From March 2020 to today, what a difficult and dynamic year it has been. Now I'm excited to be joined by our 2021 panelists. Panelists, would you please turn on your cameras? Thank you so much. After I introduce you, would you please tell us your career story? So let's start with Marguerite Pearson, Director of Marketing and Communications for the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society.
Hi, Heather, and thanks so much for including me among this wonderful panel of exceptional PR professionals. I'm honored to be here. So I got a degree in communications from Ithaca College and studied public relations among other communications disciplines. Started out working for a small newspaper when desktop publishing was just beginning. I was working on a little Macintosh cube with a screen like that big. Then I worked for a college in a communications department where I kind of, wore various hats. I was writing, doing press, that sort of thing. But what really led me to this position was a New Year's resolution. My husband and I decided one year that we wanted to get more involved in the community. So we started volunteering with an animal shelter. And I got more and more involved. First, it was, just really hands-on with the animals. And then I started doing their newsletter and doing fundraising and became a board member, and just really found that this was an area that meant a lot to me. So I returned to school. I got a license. I was a veterinary technician. I went to Delhi for that. Did a couple of internships, one with a veterinary hospital and then one with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And that's where I really realized that I didn't want to work, so much hands-on with animals, but more in like a PR and communications capacity, and to help homeless animals. So, so from there, I ended up working at Animal Protective Foundation for over 15 years. Now I'm with an amazing organization, Mohawk Hudson Humane Society, where I do a little bit of everything. Of course, public relations is part of my job, but I also do social media, writing, graphic design, media relations, and fundraising is also a large part of my job, specific to special events. So it's never boring, and I'm never far from someone cute and fuzzy to keep me inspired.
Thank you. And thank you for showing someone cute and fuzzy the last time we practiced. So that was great. All right, Siobhan Gallagher-Kent, APR, Global Communications Manager for AngioDynamics. Would you please tell us your story and explain the APR after your name?
Sure. So I know from looking at the attendee list that I've worked with a couple of people here. We have a bunch of APRs on the attendee list, which makes me very happy. So the APR is the Accreditation in Public Relations, and that's a commitment ethics that PRSA allows us to train in and demonstrate through a fairly rigorous in-person and computer-based learning program and testing program. And my career was really amped up because of the APR. So my background, like many of you who are in the audience, and like Marguerite, was not a straight shot into public relations. So for me, my guiding principle has always been, I just want to make a positive impact in the world. You know, I don't really care about the money side of things. I don't really care about the prestige side of things, although a little prestige is cool. But for me, I've just always wanted to make a positive impact. And so that meant after I got my undergraduate degree in journalism and Latin American studies, I double majored. I did neither of those things. I did an AmeriCorps Health Corps program that brought me to Albany to Whitney Young Health Services. And while I was there, I worked closely with Libby Post from Communication Services, who I'm sure a lot of you know, just kind of learning a little bit more about what she did for Whitney Young, who was a client of hers, learning more about public relations as a profession and how it could intersect with nonprofits. And I love that. And when I finished my AmeriCorps term a year later, Libby offered me a job, which I was thrilled to get. I worked for her for a couple of years and learned everything that there was to know at the time about working with nonprofits and doing integrated marketing and communications for them. And then after that, I spent a couple of years in-house with several organizations, including United Way, the Capital Region, the American Red Cross. I also served on their National Disaster Relief Team, which is an elite team of communicators. And most recently at the Community Foundation for the Greater Capital Region, where I was the communications director. And along the way, I was snookered into some leadership positions at PRSA. I served as accreditations chair, helping a lot of other people, including Heather, get their APR credential. I'm still a very passionate advocate for that. So people who are listening, feel free to reach out afterwards and I will be a cheerleader and tell you how much I love that process. I served as local chapter president, and then I was Northeast District Chair in 2018, 2019, and a couple of years ago. And then in 2018, I moved over to the corporate side to AngioDynamics, which is an international medical technology company, working to promote their technologies, but also the people behind them to key markets around the world. So it's a very, very different change for me. But going back to that guiding principle of making a positive impact, I feel like I'm still staying true to that because I am still bringing products and technologies to people that can literally save their lives. Don't tell the FDA I said that, we're not supposed to say that, but truly life-saving technology. And then I also spent the last couple of months during the pandemic getting my master's degree in health communications from Johns Hopkins University. So that was also a thing that has shaped my career path and that will shape it very, very strongly going into the future. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. And Mary, I love your background. You're the only one of us who can tell the story from what's behind you. Mary Rosact is Director of Communications for the Albany County Executive's Office, and I see your poster says County Leader of the Year. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to say that I have had the privilege and pleasure to work with, meet virtually everyone on the panel. And I am just so proud to have been asked today. My background is in broadcast journalism. I went to Syracuse University, the Newhouse School of Public Communications, and earned my BS in BJ. We say that, I say that and keep going. So I was a broadcast journalist, radio, television, for 18 years, and did everything from being an anchor, reporter, news director, producer, doing anything and everything, and loving every minute of my job. And if 2008 had not hit and economic downturn had not hit, I probably would still be doing what I was doing. That is and always will be a passion of mine. And when people ask me what I do, I always say first and foremost, I'm a journalist. And I became a journalist because I wanted to tell the story. Everything and everyone has a story. And that's really the heart, I think, of what we do. And in 2008, when the financial crisis hit, I lost my job. I had been one of the founding members that launched Capital News 9, which has gone through a number of different name changes over the years. And people looked at me and said, well, you're going to get a job. You're a journalist. You're going to get a job. Don't worry about it. And I thought, I don't know what you're smoking, but this is the beginning of something that's going to be really bad. And we now ultimately know it was really bad. But from that moment on, I said, people see me as a TV person. Well, I ran a newsroom. We had multi-million-dollar budgets. I had 104 people in a newsroom every day that looked to me and said, this is what we're doing and how we're doing it, right? So I reinvented myself. And at that point in time knew that there was going to be one sector that could benefit from what was happening. And I said, that's going to be the nonprofit sector. And I targeted nonprofits and said, there is going to be somebody, I am going to make a fraction of what I made before, but I am going to have an impact, and someone is going to be able to benefit from that. And I went to the United Way of Greater Capital Region. They created a position for me there. And I worked there for 3 years doing everything from marketing communications, launching the United Way 211, easy hotline to dial, that 3-digit number for any free health and human services information. I did leadership giving for high-end giving. And one of the most fulfilling parts of what I did was work with volunteers on large-scale volunteer projects. And, we would have up to 700 volunteers, I recall, on one day in various counties doing all kinds of projects. And I was a general contractor, right? I can put on my resume, I know how to drive a 16-foot U-Haul. I know how to negotiate for all kinds of supplies, so that United Way did not have to spend a single penny of donor dollars on those projects for the 3 years that I know that I worked on that. And that's $30,000 to $40,000 for those projects. I was very proud of that. But at that point, I said, you know what? I really missed the adrenaline rush of that newsroom and knowing and doing something before everyone else every single day. And it was never the same day twice. But going back to a newsroom, you can't go back, right? So I said I wanted something on the flip side that would still keep me in news, keep me doing something that would make a difference, and utilize my talents to tell good stories. And that's where all of a sudden we had a brand newly elected county executive, Dan McCoy, and got the phone call and ended up landing here 9.5 years ago. So every day for me is a new day, some more stressful than others. And of course, like everyone else, the last 15, 16, 17, depending when you start the count, has been, very challenging. I've described myself most recently as being, a hamster on a wheel. And that's really what I felt like, trying to tell the stories, not only get the information out as the communications person, but tell the stories and provide information and provide the public what he, she, we all needed, so that the county executive could deliver those messages. And I think we've done that very effectively. So that's where I am today. And behind me, he did earn the City and County Magazine, the County Leader of the Year. It was in 2017. You apparently can't get it after you've gotten it once, but in my book, we should definitely have probably gotten it for this past year.
Thank you, Mary. And your work has been so public over the past year with your daily press conferences. So we really appreciate that. I tuned in, and having that trusted voice was so important in the scary time. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now I'd like to introduce Charmaine Daniels, Promotion and Public Affairs Agent for the New York State Office of General Services. Hi, Charmaine.
Hi, thank you, Heather. Hello, everyone. I am happy to be amongst these amazing women on this panel, and similar to them, I have a unique background that led me to PR and communications. I actually did not know right away that I wanted to go into public relations. After high school, I actually moved to DC and took and did a break year that turned into break years. And I worked at Georgetown University Medical Center in their Medicaid billing department for a few years. And I quickly learned that, you know, no one takes you seriously unless you have your credentials or you have your education. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to go to college for. And just to kind of get my feet wet, I started taking classes at UDC, the University of District of Columbia's community college. And one day I went on campus to actually meet with my advisor, and I got lost. And when I got lost, I went into this department and I saw like this newsroom. I saw tripods with filming. I saw all these great things happening. And so I stopped someone in the hallway and I said, "What is this? What is this department?" And they said, "Oh, this is the media communications department, the media communications program." And I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. Not that great at math, you know, I'm not a singer or anything like that, but I'm like, this, I can do this. And so I started to pursue that afterwards. And shortly after, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, I actually got laid off from Georgetown and came back to Albany. And I like to talk about that part of my life as coming back to Albany with big dreams, big aspirations, and bills, because I'm now an adult at that time. And so I immediately enrolled into Hudson Valley Community College's broadcast journalism program, and I got my associate's degree. And then I matriculated into SUNY's communications program and got my bachelor's degree. But again, I'm an adult student working full time and going to school full time. And so because I had a work history in public health insurance and healthcare administration, those were really only the jobs that I could land. So I continued to take those jobs, but I always was looking for and identifying ways to marry my background with my work history, with my love for communications and PR. So I would do things at nonprofit organizations that I worked for, like create an internal newsletter, or you know, working at a health insurance company, I would be heavily involved in the corporate social responsibility activities or community engagement. And somewhere in between there, with all this going on, I went back to school after a few years and got my master's degree in organization management, which is basically a business administration degree. I don't know how I did that. I was just super driven and super focused. And so luckily for me, a few years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago, I landed a job at the Department of Health, reviewing marketing materials for the Medicaid managed care program. And I was heavily involved in a lot of activities there. And I was looking for a promotion, and I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with state government, but you know, we have the civil service system, and you're always looking for a title or a grade higher, you test in, and you know, there's these different caveats. And that promotion just did not happen. And it's okay, because I look at that part of my career as the best thing that I never had. Because had I gotten a promotion like I really was going for, I probably would not have had the opportunity to work where I work now for the New York State Office of General Services in the special events department. I work with an amazing team of passionate people who, you know, they're just great. They have taken me under their wing. We plan all these amazing large scale events at the Empire State Plaza. spanning from July 4th celebration to New York State Food Festival, the Capitol Concert Series. We have Fitness at the Plaza program. And, you know, we have some culturally themed programs as well, the New York State MLK celebration, as well as Black arts and cultural festivals, and then some smaller scale events too. So I am fortunate enough to have segued into a career in communications and public relations. And, you know, my now assistant director and I, we like to joke every so often because when I interviewed for the position, I wanted it so bad. And, you know, after I did the interview, I was professional, I was polished. But after doing the interview, I just spoke candidly and I said to them, the panel, I said, this is my job. You wrote this job description for me. I can do everything in this job. You had me in mind, and I can do everything in this job and more. And the rest is kind of history. You know, I just have a love for meeting people, connecting with people on behalf of the Plaza. There's a fundraising aspect that I am heavily involved in, and promoting the Empire State Plaza events, to promoting them to anyone who will listen.
Thank you, Charmaine. You do such a great job of that.
Thank
I
you.
remember how passionate you were when we met you in our 2018 tourism panel that we did through public relations. And you've just been such a big advocate for what you do and all the events you plan. It's really been energizing meeting you.
Thank
So
you.
I'm Heather Schechter. I'm the moderator. I'm also an APR, as Siobhan said. And I also recommend getting those credentials if you are thinking about it. Just recently, I also became senior certified professional through the Society of Human Resources Management. Like many of you, we all seem to have had kind of twisty, curvy careers. When I was in college in Manhattan at Columbia, I was a history major, and I was trying to find a career and hadn't heard of public relations before. At that time, I was looking into law. I did an internship at the New York City Department of Law, did not enjoy that, and was looking for something else. Someone suggested public relations, and then I actually had an internship at Edelman Communications in Manhattan, and that really sparked a love of public relations for me. I was working in their Advil and Axid, you know, their healthcare division, and I got to work on the Advil mini marathon. And from there, twisty, curvy career. I was also a teacher at one point, taught high school social studies, went back into public relations, and actually started my own agency, and then took on the current where I work now as a client. That was over 5 years ago. Came on with them full-time 5 years ago, and that's how I ended up where I am now. So thank you all for joining us here today. So I know this year has been a tough year, and COVID has impacted what we do. The practice of public relations has had to change. Our channels for communicating with our key stakeholders has changed. The messages changed and the way we had to communicate them. Panelists, how did COVID impact the way you practice public relations during the height of the pandemic, the way you practice it now, and how might the changes that took place during COVID impact the way you practice going forward? So let's start with Siobhan.
Sure. So for me, you know, I go into more detail on this in the blog post, so I encourage everybody to go look at that. But I've been working in angiodynamics for about 3 years now. And on March 3rd, 2020, I was promoted to global communications manager. And then 10 days later, everything shut down. And for angiodynamics, you know, we have a global workforce. We're very much set up to be a mobile company. We have hundreds of clinicals and salespeople in the field on a normal basis. So it's very easy for us to shift to remote working, which was fortunate. But at the same time, we also have about 450 manufacturing employees who are based in Glens Falls and Queensbury, and they are essential manufacturing employees. They're making a lot of durable medical devices, and that work had to continue. And normally they're working in clean room settings anyway. They already have personal protective equipment, but there were a lot of changes that had to be made just to keep them as safe as possible, as well as keeping our people in the field as safe as possible. And so while I'd started my new role, and in my job description, my role was very, very focused on external public relations. When the pandemic hit, it shifted immediately to very heavy internal communications. And it ended up not being the work that AngioDynamics intended for me to do my first year on the job, but it was the work that the organization really needed me to do. We quickly established a weekly cadence of messages to employees. We established guiding principles that made it very straightforward to make decisions, in the employee's best interest, to keep them all safe, to keep them informed. And so the past year, even though we've had a year and a half, we've launched several new products. Our company is doing fantastically. We've been very, very mercifully, spared from some of the economic catastrophe that's faced, a lot of businesses during this. Our main priority was keeping our people safe. And so, this past year and a half, I've worked with a lot of industry press. We've worked with local press to, do the parts of my job that were the normal parts. But most of that work has just been on keeping people safe. And I'm really, really happy to say that, I think that I've spent the last year doing work that a lot of us don't think is traditional PR work. I think a lot of times when we think of PR, we just think of media relations. But it was really more about looking at our different publics. And one of our really, really important groups is our employees. And I'm very, very pleased to say that we had a very small percentage of employees who contracted COVID, none seriously. When we had employees who, obviously unwittingly brought it into our manufacturing plants, we were able to immediately shut down transmission, do contact tracing, and we kept everybody safe. And so even though normally I would have spent a year getting us media placements and just being focused on that and social media and all of that, I feel like I really helped keep our employees safe. And I feel like that's the most important thing that I could have been doing this whole time.
That's important work. Thank you, Siobhan. Mary, your job has changed a lot and been so public facing. Can you tell us about that?
Well, as I said, hamster on a wheel, right? So things changed. March 12th was when we actually started virtually doing daily briefings. From the beginning of COVID, one of the things that our team talked about is that being in county government, much of what we do, almost all of what we do, is considered essential. The programs and services that people needed to keep receiving, to keep everything changed. How we were going to do all of this, and how our employees, the 2,200 or so, between 2,200 and 2,500, how they were going to be able to deliver those services, how they were, not going to be coming into the office, how they were going to work remotely. All of that was changing, and getting that messaging out. In addition, we also have a nursing home. So we had another population, a very vulnerable population that we needed to focus our attentions on as well. And during all of this, the one key component during our initial discussions was, yes, we have a public that's very different. We need not only, it's not about 100% about public relations anymore. It's not 100% about communicating. It's about communicating what people need to know. And now our audience is much broader. And so that discussion was, had and determined that we needed to have daily briefings. And what were we going to talk about in those briefings? How were we going to get that information out? And what did people need and want to know? And so every single day, it was, all right, not only what are the numbers, how does this impact what people can do? Can people leave the house? What should they do if they're leaving the house? What does Matilda's law mean if you have, someone who's 70 living with you? It's great, your mom lives with you, but can mom go anywhere? You get to see her, unlike others, but what can she or can she not do? And at the same time, doing this all in a way that was non-political. And there was never a question in our minds that the information that needed to be shared was going to be shared 100%, and it was going to be tough information. And how exactly were we going to get that across in a very different kind of way? Because you also don't want to scare people. You want people to understand what the challenges are. You want them to know what you need them to do and what they can do. They still have choice, but what those choices are going to mean to themselves, to their friends, to their family, and to the greater good of the community. And trying to do all of that in a way that it was going to reach people and it wouldn't be politicized. So, from day one, we decided the daily briefings, we knew all the media would be here, and every media outlet was here for a majority of our press briefings, all 300 plus of them that we ended up doing until we did our final briefing just a short time ago this month. And we decided that we needed to maximize that outreach by using Facebook. And we use Facebook Live. And I've got to tell you, I'm 56 years old. Facebook Live is not something that is a regular part of my my vocabulary. It became very quickly something that we learned how to do, and that I think, mastered. We would have upwards sometimes of 20,000 people that would be tuning in for that 10:30 briefing. When we looked at the numbers afterwards, I mean, it's amazing the questions that people would have and how they reacted to the information. Well, didn't react well in all instances. And, when you do this and you open yourselves up, as you all know, you open yourselves up to criticism, and you open yourself up to a lot of naysayers. And how we handled that became very important as well. So, some of the lessons that we learned, and as we continue to go forward, we learned that we had to maximize and use every opportunity to get the word out. We needed to use the media for that purpose. We had a great relationship with the media, but you know what? It's not just about what the media was going to say and how they were going to say it. We were delivered. The county executive was delivering his message each and every day, many times live for the first few months across the spectrum. And I don't just mean Spectrum News. I mean across the broadcast spectrum, whether it was taken live, just like the governor was, and sometimes, we would be bumped because of the governor. But it's amazing when you take a look at what the TV stations were doing to keep the county executive on. And people were going to Facebook. People were on Twitter. They were on Instagram. They were looking for any and everything they could find and find out. So when we realized that was happening, right away, it was my TV background, my journalism background, that really was the biggest strength, because it became a production. Every day, I looked at it as producing a show. What information, what value can we bring to the people that are at home, that can't go anywhere, that may be quarantined and are relying on our services and our National Guard to bring them food? What do people need to know in terms of going to actually get a COVID test? Where can they go? How can they do it? How can our senior citizens, who some of them were not savvy, like me, on how to get on the internet and find out how to make an appointment for a vaccination when that happened, and everything that happened since. So it was very important to bring in people that could be guests, that could come on and talk to a wider audience. And that's how, when we would reach out to people, I know when I would make phone calls and ask whether it was a business community or the restaurant association or the medical community outside of Dr. Whalen, they say, "Oh, the show. We've heard about the show." And, I cringed a little bit, because I thought, using that 4-letter word of a show kind of diminished what we were doing. And then I realized it really was. I was producing. That's what I was producing every day. And the messages that got out, and how we have reached the point that we have reached today, when we take a look at the vaccination numbers, and the fact that, in Albany County, it's, 75 plus % of 18 plus have now gotten their first dose of a vaccination. That's huge. And the fact that we are still continuing that outreach, in different ways, using some of the things that we have learned, and some of that social media. We've learned through Instagram that, we're doing special videos. We started putting together PSAs on our own about how people, the benefit of getting shots and going out to the community and having people talk to people in their community and spreading that message. So that's kind of how, everything evolved. And I think that had I not had the background that I had, and everything just kind of came together, and I was the right person in the right place at the right time to be able to assist the county executive and Albany County and this team to get that information out, to do it successfully.
Thank you for that important work. I'm sure it was a grueling year putting that all together, but for the public, it was such an important service that we were able to get information that was accurate and timely and easy to get, turning on Facebook Live. So we really appreciate your time and, the county executive and everyone who put that together. So thank you. So Charmaine, I know your year, you had been planning big public outside events, and your year must have changed the work you do quite a bit too.
Yes, absolutely. We are, we have a history and a legacy of these large scale events that are free and open to the public. Our last event before the global pandemic happened was actually Kids Expo. And after that, we shut down, and a lot of us, it took a lot of adjusting to what everyone deemed as the new normal and navigating the hardships that, a lot of our stakeholders were experiencing. That was one thing. And then for me also, in addition to that, I was used to going to networking events and going to business events throughout the Capital Region to make those connections with potential sponsors and partners of the plaza. And I was not able to do that. So a solution to that was to, start attending virtual networking events. So I tried to keep a pulse on things and, adjust and adapt. And I spoke a lot about this in the blog post as well. But I adjusted and I adapted by, attending any type of virtual activities that I could to continue to connect with the business community within the Capital Region. And as an advocate for the plaza, along with my colleagues, another part of, just that public relations component that we were extremely cognizant of was the messaging that was coming from our agency. We wanted to make sure that our messaging wasn't tone deaf, that it wasn't insensitive. We did a lot of direct calls to a lot of our vendors, a lot of our sponsors, just, making sure that they know that the plaza is still here and that we were still here. And then from a strategic marketing standpoint, we had to do a lot of brainstorming about what could we offer interim until we figure out what, the new normal was going to be. And so we started brainstorming about doing things like, DIY activities on our web pages and, making sure that those weren't insensitive and tone deaf as well. But when we talk about the future of events, especially with large scale events, I'm glad that things are, opening back up. It's an exciting time. We're continuing to navigate, but I think coming out of this global pandemic, I think that from an events perspective, we will have to take a look at hybrid events, meaning, you can have an in-person event, but you also want to have that virtual digital component or aspect available to people who are still maybe adamant about coming out and being a part of, what's happening. We used a lot of different public relations components in terms of messaging, making sure that, there was some concern there from a business standpoint. And then, also making sure that we continue to connect with our stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Charmaine. That's, an interesting transition from planning these giant in-person events to totally switching your messaging and what you do. Now, Marguerite, I know animal welfare had to continue and the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society was an essential business throughout, but what you did personally, I'm sure was very impacted over this past year. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Everything changed for us. And as you said, we are essential. Our animal care staff were there every day, taking in animals. We continue to do adoptions and provide other services for the community. But the other thing is we're funded entirely by donations. So fundraising remained critically important. And we were really nervous about what does this mean? I mean, people are losing their jobs. What is this going to mean for their ability to give? So we wanted to be extremely thoughtful and sensitive in all of our communications. For example, we continued to do events, but we did make them virtual events. But when we reached out to sponsors, we did it knowing that, this business might be struggling. So the tone of our letters, we know that this may be a hard time for you. We want to thank you for your past support. And by the way, your past support has helped us continue to do what we're doing now. And during that time, we expanded some of our services. Our pet food pantry was in extremely high demand. We gave out 5 times more food last year than we did the previous year. So our efforts really turned to focusing on keeping animals in homes so people wouldn't have to give them up because they couldn't afford to feed them or they couldn't afford, basic veterinary care. As I said, we continue to provide our low-cost spay, neuter, and wellness services. We also developed a behavior and enrichment helpline for people that might be experiencing, challenges with their animals. They couldn't get them out for training, but this helpline is available now for anyone, whether they've adopted from us or not, completely free. And we're able to utilize the expertise of our amazing behavior staff to help people through those rough spots. So that animals don't have to be surrendered to us for some of those challenges like behavior, or even to a small degree, we helped with medical things like, why isn't my cat using the litter box? Of course, there may be a medical reason for that, but these are the behavioral things that we could maybe talk folks through. So yes, in communicating with everyone, we did it all through a very a thoughtful lens of what might they be experiencing in their lives related to COVID, a loss of a job, not being able to afford to keep their animals. Internally, we had to develop new ways to communicate with each other staff-wise. Of course, the admin staff was working from home and all of our frontline staff was still there on site. But we wanted to continue to tell the story of what's going on daily in the shelter. So we really became a dedicated community of slackers. Our Slack channels became more robust than ever. We developed channels that included everything from adoptions to wins and fails to just congratulations and shout outs to kind of acknowledge the amazing staff, the amazing work that our staff on site was doing every single day. It also generated a whole new stream of content for us. We were able to find, we were able to have staff take pictures and videos in the moment as they were working with animals that maybe came in from a transport, or an animal that was receiving some behavior and enrichment, or our surgical team, doing something unique. So I think that we had more in the moment, behind the scenes content than ever before. And this is something that's really going to continue for us. And I would dare say that maybe our community got to know us a little more personally this past year than ever before, because in addition to, the continual changes of how we are doing things, making appointments for adoptions, we even did Zoom adoptions for cats, but also just seeing staff interacting with the animals in a more, personal way, and really letting them share their own content and harvesting that. I think it's given us a much more rich and authentic story to tell, and really inspiring and uplifting. I mean, I couldn't be prouder of how our entire organization really just adapted and changed and rose to every new challenge and every occasion to make things safe for everyone internally and externally. So it was pretty amazing.
Thank you, Marguerite. That's such important work that all of you guys did during this pandemic. And, during the pandemic, some companies were making cuts to their PR departments, and others realized even more, strongly how important they were. So our next question addresses advocating for the importance of public relations. How does a focus on public relations, meaning relationship building with key stakeholders, help your organization meet its strategic goals? And how do we make sure that organizations continue to see PR as an integral component of their success? Charmaine, can I start with you on that one?
Sure, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So I would like to, reiterate the component of, being a sponsorship coordinator at the Plaza. And, those partnerships and connections that I'm always seeking to make. I learned that, people don't want to do business with someone they don't know. So relationship building is essential in the work that I do. Building that relationship with them, connecting with them. One mantra that I kind of like go by is that people want like a personable connection just as much as they want a professional experience. So that relationship building and that ongoing relationship building is vital. And some examples of that, even while we were dealing with the pandemic and, there was limited things that we could do to engage stakeholders, our team at OGS, we did things like we created a web series or a video series that we refer to as Market at the Plaza. And what it did was it allowed us to connect with our vendors who, were home, who weren't really getting any business at the time. We were able to engage and spotlight them and continue building that relationship with them to let them know that they are just as important to us if they're not on the plaza as they are when they are at the plaza. So that's like one main thing. And then again, just going back to, making the best of the situation and, connecting with folks in any way that I can, in any type of format that I can, and continuing to get to know them and making those phone calls to them to make sure that they are okay and their businesses are okay, and to let them know that they have my support and to see, what I could do. So there's a lot of PR, there's a lot of communications strategies, that I had to use and I had to leverage during this time. I think a lot of times we get away from the importance of the best practices and the principles of public relations. But this was a critical time for us. And as Heather, as you mentioned just a moment ago, the PR departments are kind of like the first to kind of go. But when it's time for crisis management, we should be at the forefront. That is why we are important. That is why we are essential. That is why we are here. And as a lot of the women, we've all share a love for getting information out there on behalf of our organizations. So there's going to be no one that is going to represent the organization or the business or the small business as a person with that, with an APR or with PR background will do.
Wow, thank you, Charmaine. That was so well said. You're right. This was one long crisis that needed a lot of different communication tactics to get through. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marguerite, When I first got to meet you, we were doing press conferences through work, and then you were planning a gala, and I couldn't believe how many hats you were wearing, and how important PR is, and people just don't realize how much is involved. So, how do you continue to make sure people see PR as integral to the work that's done?
Well, you're right. It's all PR really. The relationship building, whether it be for fundraising purposes or just instilling confidence in the community that your organization is trustworthy no matter what you're doing. So in my industry, in animal welfare, there are just so many different situations across all points on the emotional spectrum. It can be a very emotional, field or industry with the people that we're dealing with on a daily basis in terms of, happy circumstances, not so happy circumstances. And again, it all comes down to instilling trust and confidence in what we do. And also, as we're dealing with those people on that very wide spectrum, always showing kindness and respect. I mean, it can be, it's heartbreaking to have to to give up an animal. So, using the right sensitivity for our staff when they're doing that. And then also, being there for those that are adopting in a very joyous moment. I have to say that it's the kindness and respect that goes a very long way. So that's the foundation, and nothing that I can do or anyone in my department really can do if that foundation isn't strong, and if our people aren't doing it person to person all the time. I mean, we can pump out fluffy stories all day, but it has to be authentic. And thankfully, we're an organization of caring professionals that really do their job exceptionally well. And so then our job becomes elevating those stories, sharing those amazing, reunions or, life-saving work that our veterinary staff does, because, we want the community to think of us first when it comes time to add a new family member to their home. But we also want to be seen as a resource, and resources take money. So, ensuring that we're telling the stories that we have so many of, and just making sure that people continue to see us as an honest, trustworthy organization. And they want to know, I have to say, the Capital Region is an incredibly caring community in terms of its animals. They want to know that the animals are being taken care of. And we saw that in spades all throughout the pandemic, people saying how reassured, thank you for doing this, thank you. And people donated to the pet food pantry. They didn't want to see animals being surrendered because other people's animals couldn't be fed. So, reassuring people that we are here for them. But again, it all has to be on the foundation of a strong staff who is really doing their job at the person-to-person level. And we're blessed that we have that.
Thank you, Marguerite. You're right. The consistency of the messaging across everything we do and across everyone who is telling the story is so super important and was essential during this time. Now, Siobhan, I know you're a strong advocate for the importance of public relations and for participating in professional organizations. So how do we make sure that organizations continue to see PR as an essential component of their success?
Yeah. Well, so those of you that know me in my personal life, I can be a little bit shy, and I think those of you who know me more professionally, that's probably a little bit surprising. And that's one thing that very quickly in the beginning of the pandemic, I got over because there's this great Shirley Chisholm quote that's you've probably heard, that's, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And for me, making sure that communications was involved in everything. I didn't just bring a folding chair. I bellied up to the table. I forced my way in. I sat my chair down and I refused to leave because, you know, communicators, we have a very misunderstood profession. People think, you know, even at my own organization, they're like, oh, we need a press release. Let's loop in Siobhan. But there's so much more to public relations and communications. And you know, while the pandemic was going on, I think I was very lucky to be doing my master's degree at the same time because it really helped me understand and back up what I was saying with research, with facts, with best practices. And that's something that all of us need to stand up and do at our organizations. We need to shove our chairs up to that leadership table because we are the ones who advise leaders how to work with each of their publics. You know, they know the business, the people who run the money, they do the money thing. I could not make, you know, a oncology surgical device to save my life, but I know how to talk to people about it. And when it comes to crisis situations like we've had over the past year, it is so critical that we are, you know, as everybody on the panel has said today, that we're communicating with the right people, with the right message at the right time from the right spokespeople. That has made literally a life and death difference over the course of the pandemic in terms of people trusting the information that they receive, trusting their community institutions. And so I think it's just up to all of us to be better than what they expect, to get that APR, to, you know, whether you go crazy and get a master's degree or not, you know, read the daily PRSA emails, see what's going on in the industry, see what the best practices and what the emerging best practices are, and then just force that into your organization. You know, the time to be quiet and to kind of let people do their thing. I really feel like that time is over. And you know, we really have to make people know the importance of communications and use this past year and a half as an example of the critical value of communications, not just in terms of working with the media, but in terms of working with all of our audiences. So I would just encourage all of you who are on this call today, you know, I'm so glad that you joined all of us, but just make your voices heard, you know, especially as, you know, most of us are women who are on this call. You know, it's really hard, I think, sometimes for us in professional settings to feel like our opinions are not only valid, but valid enough to be heard by leadership. And we need to take all of that doubt out of the equation. We need to start making our voices heard on a permanent basis because, you know, as we've seen over the last year and a half, it could literally be a matter of life and death. So it's that important that you speak up.
Wow, thank you, Siobhan. That was well said. Mary, I don't think you've had any trouble being shy about advising leaders.
No, but you know, it's interesting because it's, you know, politics and government, it's male dominated. I am the only woman that's a member of the senior staff. And it's one of those things where when the pandemic hit, I've always, it's not like I was ever afraid to say anything, but I know that I'm one voice at the table. And it's always been very clear that we would talk and come to consensus. And this was not necessarily a situation where it was a consensus situation. This was a very different kind of a situation. So I found myself being even more assertive. I found myself saying, you know, no, I ran a newsroom and this is what's going to happen if you do this to our team. And sometimes it was harder than others to explain why that would be, because I think we have all encountered, no matter what industry we are in, everyone seems to know how to do our jobs. Everyone knows how to communicate, how to do a press release. Everybody knows how to, you know, send the right message. Everybody knows what should be marketed in a certain way. And, you know, I say that tongue in cheek, but everyone has ideas, right? Not every idea is a good idea. And I'm sorry, but people don't like to hear that. I'll listen to what you've got to say, but it may not be the best thing for us to do. And so I think that, you know, the value of PR was really recognized in government, in our office, more so over the last year and a half than ever, because it didn't become, oh, PR, do that nice little event that we're going to get a smile about, and that's a good story. It became, how are you going to be able to help us tell the right story to the audience, which is much broader and much larger than a targeted demographic that we've ever had before? And how are we going to do this in a way that is sensitive, but not overly sensitive, that is not going to scare people, that is going to spur people to action? What is that call to action? You know, all of that. So I know that there are a lot of women that are participating in this today. And I think that, as Siobhan said, and as we've all kind of said, you really need to make sure you are heard. And you need to make sure that you are at that table and you have, you know, let everyone know you have more than something to offer. That's why you're in that position. That's why you're here. And you're the expert. You're not going to have all the right answers, but you're the expert in this particular area. And you need to make sure that that's recognized. So I can't foresee in the near future anyone saying that the PR part of what I do needs to go away, because I know that value was seen. But I know as time goes on and memories fade, you know, people may forget. So you just have to keep plugging away and make sure that value is remembered each and every day.
Thank you so much. Wow. I mean, I feel like I could spend 4 hours with all of you. I'm just going to ask one last question. You know, there's a lot of people who may be interested in public relations, interested in embarking on this career for the first time, whether straight out of college, whether, you know, already have an established career and want to switch directions. So what's one piece of advice you'd offer someone starting out in public relations? Marguerite, would you kick that off?
Sure thing. So I think for me, it's always been about feeling a deep commitment to the cause. You know, I worked in a firm for a little bit, and it was great experience. But I was dealing with a lot of different clients, and honestly, that was difficult for me because I was, you know, switching. I had to be their advocate, and a lot of times I didn't feel like I knew them well enough. So for me, it's always been about a specific cause. And I guess as people are thinking about a career in public relations, think about, do you want to do agency work? Is that something that you feel you would like, that, you know, flexibility and, you know, all kinds of different clients and, you know, kind of different focus all the time? Or are you more like me and you want to focus on one thing and get deep in that and really, you know, do your best at that? And no way is wrong. It's just what feels best for you. And you're going to be a better communicator once you find what is the right way for you.
Thank you. What about you, Siobhan?
So for me, you know, and again, those of you who know me, I say this all the time, I sound like a broken record, but I always tell people just stay flexible and stay adaptable. You know, I think that everybody on the panel, and Heather too, you know, like we've said, our career paths and then the last year and a half have shown us that you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but you know that change is going to happen. So you need to embrace that spirit of flexibility and, you know, adaptability, so that whatever's coming down the pike, you understand the best practices, you understand the industry, you understand the opportunities and the challenges and the strengths and the weaknesses and threats that are involved. And that way you can flex, you can be the communicator that your organization and that your community needs you to be, and you'll be able to stay ahead of the curve. You just have to embrace the spirit of flexibility and adaptability.
Thank you so much. Mary?
Yeah, there's the technology again. I think also that if you're thinking about public relations, you really need to be a people person. And when I say a people person, it may not be the people person that existed in 2019, but you need to be the person who really listens, who hears, and then cares. Because if you are listening to what someone is saying and you hear them, you're not going to ask them an inappropriate question or say something that is a non sequitur. You're going to be able to adapt, as Siobhan said, and you're going to be able to help. and you're going to show that you really care. And then that builds a relationship and that builds the trust. And that's what public relations is all about. It's building that relationship and that trust. And you're not going to do it if you don't genuinely, honestly care about what you're doing. And so that's really got to be a key component. You know, I know people can be shy. I know I can be shy. Siobhan, you said you can be shy, but you know what? You can't be shy in public relations on that front. You need to put on that face. You need to get out there. You need to be real about it, but you need to show and demonstrate that you care, and that's what you want to do to help, whether you're doing it for one organization, whether you're doing it in an agency, whether you're doing, you know, no matter how, that is what's going to make you successful.
Thank you. Yes, listening is such an important skill and something timeless. Charmaine, what advice would you offer?
Oh, wow. So I'm going to piggyback on what all the other panelists were saying about flexibility, adaptability. I'm learning right now as we are all, like, as everyone is talking, I'm putting it in my tool belt as well. I would also say, and this is something that I mentioned in the blog, and I want to encourage women today and society today to become multi-layered. The term I'm using and the context that I'm using it in is to say, diversify yourself. As you segue into becoming a PR practitioner, if you're working for a web developer, or if you're creating graphics, learn how to do coding as well. Take a workshop, you know, build from that. If you know, I know when I was going to school, and I'm dating myself, but when I was in college, MySpace was popular. Well, social media is an entire industry within itself right now. So as Siobhan said, make sure you're flexible, make sure you're learning, make sure that you defer to PRSA to see what professional development opportunities may be available. As Mary said, make sure you listen to people to make that connection. But ultimately, I want to encourage women, just not from the standpoint of PR, but just in life in general. We talked earlier about layoffs and people being furloughed. You know, during the global pandemic, we have to diversify ourselves. You know, if you're buying a house and you're purchasing a house and the real estate agent is amazing, but their marketing is subpar, approach them about doing marketing for them. Diversify yourself. Let's get multiple streams of income coming in, because, you know, from a financial standpoint, we have all these different talents and we need to hone in on these talents, especially with our love for communications and PR, and we need to make the most of it. And, you know, one last thing I will say is, you know, remain humble too. Remain humble. People know when someone is genuine and when they're disingenuine. And when you're a genuine person and they see that you're passionate, the reason why I'm on this panel, Heather didn't know any of my credentials. It was just that I was passionate when she met me, and I'm passionate today. I'm passionate when I'm backstage at an event at the Plaza, when I'm talking about a community event that's coming up and I'm sharing and disseminating information. If it's a product or a service or anything that a cause that I believe in, I'm genuine about it. I'll take it a step further as well, and I'll leave everyone with this. When I come into a room, or when I get an opportunity to work with another PR practitioner or someone that I look up to in any industry, I always say to them upon meeting, the first meeting or throughout the life of the project, I'm looking forward to learning from you and growing with you. And so keep that humility. And again, to the women and to men as well, multiple streams of income. It's okay to be multi-layered. It's okay to dabble in graphic design, digital marketing, as well as being able to put together a media kit and a press release, because when the opportunity presents itself, you want to be prepared. Prepare for the job that you want, not the one that you have.
Wow, it's been so great to hear from all of you. I really appreciate it. And I think all of us do who are participating. One more piece I'm going to add is the importance of joining a professional association. If you're interested in a career, you get that daily inspiration, hearing what's new in the industry, what the best practices are, what the current research says. So that's a really good way to stay current, to get involved, and to practice your skills. So thank you everyone for joining us for the 4th annual Women in Public Relations panel. And I really appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.